Global National. Reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. It is a sport tied to our national identity, and today Canadians woke up with a new reason to feel proud. One of hockey's brightest stars, Connor McDavid, scored the winning goal in an overtime thriller at the Four Nations Face-Off tournament. More than 7 million Canadians watched the excitement unfold. There was no public reaction from the American president as Canada's flag was raised with the anthem. Our Mike Armstrong was at the game in Boston. And Mike, some of your colleagues are a little jealous of your assignment. What was it like to be there?
Well, Neither, it was very special. This was a very emotional game. The players haven't wanted to talk about politics, but that certainly added to the tension. That said, you didn't have to be here in Boston to feel it. There probably wasn't a place in Canada that didn't have a watch party, and they all ended like this, whether it was Montreal, Windsor, Ontario, or Calgary. Now, there were places that didn't see Connor McDavid pot the winning goal in overtime, but word spread. At the Our Lady Peace concert in Edmonton, the performance was paused for an impromptu moment of patriotism. The Prime Minister watched from Ottawa and followed up with a post to social media, one that Fox News is calling a fiery message to the U.S. Responding to President Trump repeatedly saying he's going to annex Canada, Trudeau wrote, "You can't take our country, and you can't take our game." For the entire tournament, the Canadian players avoided the pitfalls of talking politics. Well, post-game, their coach made it clear they understood the pressure that was out there.
Yeah, did we need a win? Not only like our team, but Canada needed a win, and the players bared that on their shoulders.
Now, one concern going into this tournament for Team Canada was in goal. Instead, in the final, Jordan Binnington, with ice in his veins, robbed Team USA's top snipers repeatedly. According to both his coach and his captain, Binnington was the difference.
I don't think I have enough words, to be honest with you. He was incredible. So much poise. Just huge saves.
The NHL is getting rave reviews across the board for this tournament. Hockey's profile in the U.S. got a boost thanks to the Canada-U.S. rivalry, and the fans that flew in, like this family now headed home to Nova Scotia, were shocked at their luck.
Leading up to it, we just thought it was going to be a glorified exhibition, and never in our wildest dreams did we expect to see what we saw last night.
Now, one person who seems almost ready to turn the page already is Connor McDavid. When he met the media last night, literally minutes after scoring the winning goal, he already said he was turning his sights on next year and the Olympics in Italy. Neithu?
All right, Mike Armstrong in Boston. Thanks, Mike. The night wasn't without controversy. The Canadian who sang the national anthem made a political statement by altering some of the lyrics.
True patriot love.
Chantal Kreviazuk changed the line in "All of Us Command" to "That Only Us Command" in response to U.S. President Trump's repeated comments about Canada. Kreviazuk says, "In this very peculiar and potentially consequential moment, I truly believe that we must stand up, use our voices, and try to protect ourselves." Later on Global National, how Canadians are celebrating a win that many say this country needed. With the threat of crippling tariffs looming, two premiers spent the day in Washington, once again trying to get top U.S. leaders to convince the president to back off. At the same time, the federal government says it is doing everything it can to protect Canadian businesses. Mackenzie Gray joins us now. Mackenzie?
The federal government's trying to cut down on trade barriers within Canada, Neithu, announcing late Friday night it's cutting over half its limitations on which Canadian businesses can bid on government contracts.
We have it within ourselves to get rid of them all, and that's what we're working at doing.
But the Liberals didn't detail the specifics on which rules are being changed or the impact it could have on the economy, but it is part of a broader push to protect against Donald Trump.
We're going to be announcing tariffs on cars from foreign countries of 25%. That'll be done in probably April 2nd. I was going to do it April 1st, but I said I don't like that date.
To try and avoid that happening, some premiers continuing their U.S. charm offensive, with Ontario's Doug Ford and Nova Scotia's Tim Houston meeting with the governors of Georgia and West Virginia, but no one from the Trump administration. Less than 2 weeks after the premier's trip to the White House, which only led to a meeting with two mid-level Trump officials. While Canada has been able to avoid the tariffs so far, there's still been an impact.
The threat of tariffs is already feeding uncertainty. It's already affecting the economy. It's already doing damage.
Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem warning that if tariffs are imposed, Canadians should not expect interest rates to be slashed to COVID levels, and that economic damage inflicted on the Canadian economy will likely be permanent.
In the case of a trade war, there's no bounce back. If you introduce tariffs, the economy works less efficiently.
Sobering words for Canadian companies, particularly steel and aluminum businesses, which Trump has promised to slap an additional 25% tariff on.
If this thing occurs for a month or two, we'll probably, suck it up. But this thing persists. Significant cost cutting will be occurring. It'll be layoff, it'll be job losses.
It's not just trade barriers, Neithu. Macklem urged governments to get building everything from pipelines to ports and other transportation infrastructure.
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mackenzie. The Liberal Party of Canada has disqualified candidate Ruby Dalla from the leadership race. In a statement, the party says it was a unanimous decision to remove the former Brampton MP from the race over allegations of violations, including of the Canada Elections Act and inaccurate financial reporting. The party describes the alleged violations as extremely serious. On social media, Dalla says the allegations the party has used against her are false and fabricated. This comes just days before the debates in Montreal. And in the U.S. tonight, tech billionaire Elon Musk is revving up the visual imagery. He apparently wants to make a point about how he and President Trump believe there is too much government waste and inefficiency. Candace Cole reports from Washington.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy.
Elon Musk, head of the U.S. Department of Government Efficiency, waved a chainsaw on stage at a conservative conference Thursday night, a gift from embattled Argentine President Javier Milei, symbolizing the shock treatment used to slash the federal workforce in the name of government savings.
Could be $500 billion, but it could be $1 trillion. It could be even $1.5 trillion. We're going to find out.
DOJ is investigating at least 18 federal agencies, but has yet to provide actual evidence of fraud or abuse. This week, a federal judge ruled the president can move forward with mass firings of federal workers pending litigation.
What a judge is saying is, well, look, if you're fired, you can always sue for wrongful termination. I'm not going to stop the president right now from terminating all these people.
With Trump now zeroing in on the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS has begun layoffs with more than 6,000 employees expected to be cut.
I'm very concerned about the possible delay in refunds.
And this week, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy announced plans to step down as Trump considers privatizing the U.S. Postal Service. Trump is also planning to shut down the Department of Education. Education Secretary nominee Linda McMahon vowed to cut funding for schools that don't comply with the White House's stance on DEI programs and transgender athletes playing women's sports, but said only an act of Congress can abolish the Department of Education.
The federal government can absolutely withhold funds from state and local governments to pressure them to bend to their will. The question, though, is who in the federal government can withhold the funds? It really should be Congress.
The Department of Defense is next on DOJ's list. Today, the Pentagon pressed pause on plans to get rid of over 50,000 civilian federal employees, at least for now. Neithu?
Candace Cole in Washington. Thanks, Candace. Prince Edward Island swore in its new premier today.
Your support gives me confidence and fuels my determination, and I'll work every day to earn the trust you've placed in me.
Rob Lance is taking the helm after the resignation of former Premier Dennis King. Lance served as Conservative Party leader 10 years ago, but resigned after failing to win the election that year. People in Ontario will elect their new premier next week. Progressive Conservative leader and current Premier Doug Ford is seeking a third term, but is being criticized for calling the vote now. Seán O'Shea reports.
It's the election political opponents didn't want now. He didn't need to call an election. He still had 16 months in his mandate.
Ontario PC leader Doug Ford sending people to the polls during one of the snowiest winters in recent history.
We have the smartest, the brightest people anywhere.
It was definitely Doug Ford's election to lose.
We're going to eliminate the gimmicks and the giveaways.
Ontario Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie's campaigning for better education and health care, pledging to recruit and retain more family doctors.
Those that are retiring, we're going to incentivize them to stay a little longer.
Bart Stiles,
build affordable homes.
The provincial NDP, the official opposition, has health care and housing in its campaign arsenal.
What I'm hearing is people are waking up to this election.
But new Ipsos polling done exclusively for Global News shows Doug Ford's campaign, focused on Donald Trump and tariffs, seems to be working.
Canada-U.S. relations and economic issues that relate to our pending trade difficulties with the United States, and they really seem to be dominating the agenda.
Ford has traveled to the U.S. again for meetings, but has taken limited questions from reporters in Ontario.
It's nonstop, folks. 5 in the morning till midnight every single day.
When Ford won in 2022, just 43% of eligible voters cast ballots, lowest in the province's history. The turnout in this winter election is expected to be even lower, which may favor the incumbent.
It looks at the moment like Premier Ford and the Progressive Conservative Party are cruising to a third majority government, maybe even bigger than their last one.
Advance polls opened this week. The outcome of the election next Thursday will depend not just on who people say they favor, but whether voters will brave snowbanks and show up to vote. Seán O'Shea, Global News, Toronto.
Global News will have full coverage of Decision Ontario. Streaming begins February 27th at 8 p.m., 9 o'clock on Global TV. The man accused of driving a city bus into a daycare near Montreal 2 years ago, killing 2 children, could be found criminally not responsible. Pierre-Ny Saint-Amand is facing 2 murder charges in Laval. Today, an expert for the Crown agreed with the defense that the former bus driver suffers from a severe mental disorder. This means the judge could send him to a psychiatric institution instead of prison. German voters prepare for a pivotal election. Coming up, the growing fears the far right could gain more influence. In Germany, a search is underway after a stabbing attack at Berlin's Holocaust Memorial. It happened on the grounds of the site honoring the 6 million Jews killed during the Holocaust. At least 1 man was seriously injured. The area, which is near the U.S. Embassy, has been sealed off as police search for the suspect. The stabbing happened ahead of Sunday's federal election in Germany, a vote that will almost certainly see the conservative opposition, called the Christian Democratic Union, come out on top. But the party will likely need to form a coalition government. While it's promised not to be propped up by the far right, there are fears the so-called political firewall is slowly being breached. Redmond Shannon is in Berlin and is tracking the lead up to the vote. Redmond?
Nitu, it's the party most likely to come second in Sunday's election that is the focus of much of the debate here in Germany. The far-right AfD. Among its policies is a plan for a mass deportation of undocumented migrants and some asylum seekers. Reportedly, the party had also been considering including some German citizens of a migrant background in that plan. None of the other parties here in Germany say they will ever work with the AfD as part of a coalition government, a pact known as the Firewall. This agreement in a country that just 80 years ago was still under the rule of the fascist Nazi Party. But just last month, the AfD supported an opposition migration bill proposed by the Christian Democrats, the party most likely to come out on top on Sunday. That perceived cooperation between those two parties triggered huge protests across Germany amid fears that the so-called firewall could be cracking. Polls suggest that almost 90% of German voters are also concerned about foreign interference in this election, most notably from Russia online, but also the direct intervention of one of the world's richest men in support of the AfD, Elon Musk. Nitu?
Okay, Redmond Shannon in Berlin. Thanks, Redmond. New world order ahead, the shifting landscape under U.S. President Donald Trump. Just over a month into President Trump's second term in office, it's becoming clear around the world America's approach to foreign policy is undergoing a significant change. Since the end of the Second World War, the United States alliance with the global West has been steady. But as that evolves, the world order we've known for 80 years could be set for a seismic shift. Heather West spoke with experts from Europe, Australia, and the U.S. about what it could mean for the years ahead.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia.
From a speech in Munich from the U.S. Vice President that shocked European leaders with its criticism.
In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
To Donald Trump adopting Russian lies on the topic of Ukraine.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left.
There is a growing sense among those that study history that geopolitically the world is on the brink of a significant shift.
This is such uncharted territory. None of us have actually lived through anything like this before.
From the devastation of the Second World War, world leaders created the liberal world order system we have come to know for nearly 80 years, a system of international law with institutions like the United Nations and alliances like the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, working to keep the globe from entering into another world war.
We really do have to go that far back to find a transition point that seems to be as significant as this one is turning out to be. That Trump wants to undo this order. He believes that it has been basically decades and decades of the rest of the world taking advantage of the United States.
I think everyone's looking for a plan B right now. Everyone's trying to think, okay, well, now what?
At the moment, there are only theories about what could lie ahead, some optimistic.
I think the post-war liberal institutions are resilient enough that they'll survive 4 years of this. They're just going to take a bit of a bruising for the next few years.
Others more cautionary.
We're going to be living in a world with three big superpowers, the United States, Russia, and China. And we're going to see more and more that smaller countries don't have their voices listened to and that they are bent to the will of these superpowers.
Where there is growing agreement, the period of history we're living through now will be remembered as pivotal and important. Heather West, Global News, Calgary.
Bird flu has been detected in rats for the first time in the United States. The U.S. Department of Agriculture says avian flu was found in 4 rats in California, where 2 recent poultry outbreaks were reported. The virus has previously been found in other rodents like mice and squirrels, and in mammals, including raccoons. Officials say the risk to the public is low. Celebrating Canada. Next, we'll take you back to Boston and the ramifications of the big win. When Connor McDavid's shot hit the back of the net last night in Boston, it seemed an entire nation was finally able to exhale. From coast to coast to coast, Canadian hockey fans are celebrating the end of a thrilling week of hockey. For many, it was another show of Canadian dominance on the ice, but as Eric Sorensen explains, this one came with an extra kick that could be felt far beyond the rink.
From the moment of victory in small neighborhood pubs to the post-game winner's dressing room, to the quiet afterglow in neighborhoods across the country today.
You make us proud, and not just on the ice, but off the ice. These guys are first class.
It was more than just a hockey game. Asked what he was drinking afterward, Canada's coach cracked a smile.
You know what it is? It's Canadian. It was made in Canada.
The jerseys, the flags, the determination of this team, it was national pride made in Canada at a time of geopolitical tension.
The president's comments about us potentially becoming a first state sort of rolled into the excitement of the game, I think.
It's not the first time. High drama in the 1972 Summit Series saw Canadian players and officials fighting the Soviets. Hockey symbolizing the Cold War, Canada versus communism. 50 years later, who would have expected a U.S. president to threaten Canada's sovereignty? A fight that spilled onto the ice, creating emotions beyond the game itself.
I don't know much about politics, but we know that USA, Canada, it's kind of a thing right now.
One cartoon captured how Donald Trump might view the outcome. Yet the intensity ultimately was good for the game. The U.S. coach says it's the fastest this sport has ever been played.
If you love hockey, it would be hard not to get excited. And these guys are the savants of the game. You know, the game evolves because of their creativity.
In this country especially, from Gordie Howe to Bobby Orr, each generation of the game's greatest has inspired the next. A future McDavid is out there somewhere. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
It certainly does. What a win. That is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. We'll leave you tonight looking back at more moments from Team Canada's big win last night, including this photo of team member Seth Jarvis celebrating with his friends who drove 30 hours from Winnipeg to support him after their flight was cancelled. Clearly not enough to just be there in spirit like millions of Canadians were last night for the monumental matchup. Thanks so much for watching and hope to see you here again tomorrow.